Before you rush into booking the 2026 Hyundai Tucson, here's something you need to know. The Tucson may be one of Hyundai's global bestsellers, but the 2026 model year hasn't exactly delivered the upgrades buyers were expecting. In fact, early reports, test data, and owner feedback reveal several issues that could make you think twice, especially when the competition is heating up fast. Sure, the Tucson still looks sharp, but under the hood, it carries the same 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine, producing around 187 horsepower and 178 lb-ft of torque. Numbers that fall behind rivals like the 2026 Honda CR-V hybrids, 204 horsepower, and the RAV4 hybrids, 219 horsepower. Even the turbo hybrid competitors are delivering 0 to 60 miles per hour times in the low 7-second range, while the Tucson's standard engine still hovers close to 9 seconds, making it one of the slowest in the segment for 2026. And it doesn't end there. Its real-world fuel economy, interior practicality, hybrid pricing, ADAS tuning, and long-term reliability trends are raising eyebrows too. With Hyundai bumping the Tucson's price closer to the $36,000 to $45,000 range for mid and top trims, buyers are starting to wonder if the value proposition is slipping away, especially when competitors offer better efficiency, more space, and stronger resale value. So if you're planning to get the new Tucson just based on looks or features, stay tuned. Because today, we're breaking down the 8 key reasons why the 2026 Hyundai Tucson might not be the right SUV for you, backed by numbers, comparisons, and real ownership insights. This is Parth, and you are watching MotorNation. Starting with the first reason, let's talk about one of the Tucson's biggest weaknesses, its modest base engine. The 2026 Hyundai Tucson might look bold and futuristic on the outside, but the moment you get behind the wheel, the powertrain tells a different story. Hyundai continues to use its familiar 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine, making 187 horsepower and 178 lb-ft of torque. Those numbers sound fine on paper, but in real-world driving, the Tucson feels sluggish and hesitant, especially when you need quick acceleration. Most early tests still place its 0 to 60 miles per hour time close to 9 seconds, which puts it at the slower end of the compact SUV segment for 2026. You especially feel this when merging onto highways or trying to overtake. The engine needs time to build power, and the 8-speed automatic transmission often shuffles gears just to keep the Tucson moving with confidence. It's smooth enough at city speeds, but once the road opens up or the SUV is carrying passengers, the lack of torque becomes obvious. And this wouldn't be such a big issue if the competition wasn't moving forward so aggressively. The Toyota RAV4 hybrid delivers stronger low-end punch. The CR-V hybrid feels more responsive and refined, and even the Kia Sportage hybrid, built on a similar platform, manages to feel quicker and more efficient. When you compare them back to back, the Tucson's engine simply feels dated. Reviewers like Kelley Blue Book call its performance modest, and with prices now reaching into the mid-$30,000 and beyond, buyers naturally expect more power and modern hybrid options. The Tucson's base engine just doesn't match the ambition of its design, and for many shoppers, that alone is enough reason to rethink the 2026 Tucson. Moving on to the next reason, let's talk about the transmission, because this is another area where the 2026 Tucson shows cracks beneath the surface. Hyundai sticks with its 8-speed automatic transmission across the lineup, and while it's designed to offer smooth shifts and better fuel efficiency, real-world feedback tells a more complicated story. Some owners of recent Tucson models, and even early testers of the 2026 version, have reported shift hesitation, rough downshifting, and occasional moments where the gearbox feels unsure of what it wants to do. These aren't catastrophic failures, but small quirks that add up and affect the overall driving experience. You especially notice it during low-speed acceleration or when you suddenly need extra power. The transmission sometimes pauses before downshifting, creating a split-second delay that can catch you off guard when merging or overtaking. In stop-and-go traffic, it may occasionally feel jerky as it transitions between first and second gear, and on downhill stretches, some drivers have described the downshifts as abrupt or unpredictable. It's the kind of behavior that makes the SUV feel less refined than its competitors, even when the rest of the cabin does a great job pretending otherwise. Part of the issue is the engine itself. With limited low-end torque, the transmission works overtime trying to extract performance, and that constant hunting for the right gear can make the drive feel busier than it should. Rivals with hybrid setups or smoother CVTs simply feel more composed and predictable in comparison. Toyota's ECVT and Honda's hybrid transmission may not be thrilling, but they deliver consistent response every single time, something Tucson owners can't always say confidently. These transmission quirks aren't universal, but they're common enough to show up repeatedly in owner reviews and service discussions. And for buyers expecting a refined driving experience, especially in a 2026 model year vehicle, this lingering roughness is something worth paying attention to. After all, the transmission is one of the most important components of day-to-day drivability, and if it isn't consistently smooth, the entire driving experience takes a hit. Next up, let's talk about reliability, because this is an area where the Tucson's history raises a few red flags. While Hyundai as a brand has built a strong reputation for long warranties and solid engineering, the Tucson hasn't had the cleanest track record in its recent generations. Looking back at used car reliability data from the 2021 and 2022 model years, which share much of the same engine architecture and components, you start to see patterns of issues that are difficult to ignore. Some owners have reported problems with the timing chain tensioner, which in rare cases can lead to rattling noises on cold starts or improper chain tension over time. There have also been cases involving valve timing solenoid faults, which can trigger check engine lights, rough idle, or reduce performance. Now, to be clear, not every Tucson suffers from these failures, but the fact that these issues appear frequently enough in ownership forums and used car reliability reports does raise concerns about the long-term durability of certain components. And because the 2026 Tucson continues to use a variation of the same SmartStream engine family, buyers naturally wonder whether these problems could resurface as the years go by. The challenge here is that reliability trends often take time to reveal themselves. Early owners of the 2026 model won't notice these issues right away. It's typically the second or third year of ownership when such component-related problems appear. And with Hyundai pushing the Tucson into a more premium price bracket, buyers expect worry-free ownership, not questions about whether critical engine components might need attention down the line. It's not a deal-breaker for everyone, but for shoppers prioritizing long-term peace of mind, these lingering reliability concerns are definitely something to take seriously before choosing the 2026 Tucson. Another reason to be cautious with the 2026 Tucson is its track record with electrical and infotainment-related glitches. Hyundai has pushed hard toward a tech-forward interior, but that level of digital integration comes with its own set of challenges. Even the last few model years, owners have reported issues ranging from unresponsive or freezing infotainment screens to strange, intermittent door lock malfunctions and occasional bugs in the vehicle's electronic control modules. These problems don't happen to everyone, but they're frequent enough to show up consistently in owner feedback and long-term user reviews. The infotainment system, in particular, has been a point of frustration for some. Drivers have described moments where the display lags, refuses to register touch inputs, or suddenly restarts itself while driving. That may sound minor, but when your navigation freezes or your backup camera doesn't appear instantly, it becomes more than just a small annoyance. It affects safety and convenience. Some owners of previous Tucsons have also reported that the digital gauge cluster can glitch momentarily, showing incorrect readings or delayed animations during startup. For buyers expecting a polished, trouble-free tech experience, especially in a vehicle positioned as modern and futuristic as the Tucson. These electronic inconsistencies can become frustrating over time. And since the 2026 model continues to rely on similar software architecture and components, these concerns remain relevant for anyone thinking about long-term ownership. Another factor that might make you think twice about the 2026 Tucson is its lower long-term resale value. Now, Hyundai has come a long way in building brand trust, but when it comes to retaining value over 5 or more years, the Tucson still trails behind the segment leaders. According to projected resale analyses, the Tucson is expected to retain around 55.4% of its value after 5 years. And while that isn't terrible by any means, it does fall short when you compare it to the heavyweights of the segment. The Toyota RAV4, for example, consistently holds closer to 60 to 65% of its original value, depending on the trim and powertrain. The Honda CR-V isn't far behind, typically staying in the 58 to 62% range. That difference may not seem huge on paper, but in real-world dollars, it can translate into thousands more in your pocket when it's time to sell or trade in. Buyers are willing to pay a premium for those brands because they're known for bulletproof reliability, stronger demand in the used market, and lower long-term maintenance concerns. The Tucson, on the other hand, doesn't enjoy the same reputation yet. Its resale values tend to soften faster, partly due to Hyundai's more aggressive incentives, and partly because buyers still trust Toyota and Honda more in the long run. Even dealerships often offer lower trade-in values for Tucsons compared to similarly aged rivals from Japan. For anyone planning to keep the vehicle for many years, this may not be a deal breaker. But if you're someone who upgrades every 3 to 5 years, or if you care about getting the maximum return on your investment, the Tucson's weaker resale performance is definitely a factor worth considering. Over time, that depreciation gap can make the 2026 Tucson more expensive than it initially looks. Another important concern with the 2026 Tucson is the noticeable fuel economy trade-off when you upgrade to all-wheel drive. The front-wheel drive Tucson already delivers mileage that's decent but not class-leading. However, once you step into the AWD variant, something many buyers choose for added confidence in rain, snow, or uneven terrain, the fuel efficiency drops more than some shoppers expect. Based on the quoted 2025 EPA ratings, AWD Tucsons return around 24 miles per gallon in the city and 30 miles per gallon on the highway, numbers that put it on the lower side of the segment in 2026. Now, that might seem acceptable until you compare it with what competitors are offering. The Toyota RAV4 Hybrid easily touches 41 miles per gallon city and 38 miles per gallon highway, which means it delivers nearly 10 to 15 miles per gallon more in many real-world situations. The Honda CR-V Hybrid stays strong at around 40 miles per gallon combined, and even Hyundai's own sibling, the Kia Sportage Hybrid, posts far better numbers than the Tucson's AWD gasoline version. This gap becomes especially noticeable on longer trips or for buyers who drive high mileage every year. Over a 5-year ownership period, choosing the Tucson AWD over a hybrid competitor could mean spending $1,500 to $3,000 more on fuel, depending on driving habits and fuel prices in your area. And with fuel costs fluctuating, that difference may grow over time. The frustrating part is that AWD usually adds around $1,500 to $2,000 to the Tucson's upfront price, and then continues to cost more throughout ownership due to lower efficiency. So buyers end up paying extra twice, first at the dealership, and then every time they visit the pump. And in a segment where efficiency has become a major selling point, especially in 2026 with hybrids becoming the norm, this drop in mileage puts the Tucson at a disadvantage. The AWD system does bring stability and traction, yes, but the fuel economy penalty feels more noticeable today than it did just a few years ago. For shoppers who prioritize both capability and long-term savings, This AWD efficiency trade-off is definitely something worth thinking about before committing to the 2026 Tucson. And moving on to the next reason, the 2026 Tucson still carries a shadow from its earlier model years: the risk of electrical management issues that tend to show up as the miles pile on. While Hyundai has refined the software for 2026, long-term owners of the previous generation have reported occasional limp mode, events triggered by inconsistent signal from sensors, voltage irregularities, or wiring that doesn't handle heat and moisture as well as it should. These issues usually don't show up in the first few years, but once the SUV crosses the 80,000 to 100,000 mile mark, some drivers have experienced sudden drops in power, throttle hesitation, and warning clusters lighting up together. Engine, traction, ABS, you name it. The frustrating part is that the problems are often intermittent, disappearing after a restart, making diagnostics difficult and sometimes expensive. Repairs can range from a $150 sensor fix to $900 or more if sections of the wiring harness need attention. So while this won't affect every Tucson owner, it's a long-term ownership risk worth noting, especially if you plan to keep the SUV for several years or live in a climate where heat and humidity accelerate wear on electrical components. And closing out with the eighth and final reason to avoid the 2026 Hyundai Tucson, we have something that continues to follow this SUV across multiple model years: mixed ownership feedback on overall quality control. Even though Hyundai has polished the Tucson's engineering for 2026, the previous generation left behind a record that's too inconsistent to ignore. Owners of 2021 to 2023 models have reported issues ranging from misfiring wheel speed sensors, random ADAS warning pop-ups, and the occasional infotainment freeze, to early interior rattles and slight transmission hesitation that varies from unit to unit. What makes this more complicated is the pattern tied to production origin. The Tucson is built across several plants worldwide, and longtime owners on Reddit and model-specific forums often note small but noticeable differences between batches, such as panel gaps that aren't perfectly even, slightly different cabin noise levels, or early life sensor behavior that depends on which factory assembled the SUV. Some claim the Ulsan-built models tend to exhibit fewer electronic gremlins, while others report that Mexican-assembled units feel tighter in terms of interior trim. Hyundai hasn't confirmed any of these differences officially, but the owner data shows real variation. And that's the core issue: consistency. While many drivers have cruised past 80,000 miles without a single problem, others encounter these smaller, persistent annoyances within the first year of ownership. The Tucson isn't unreliable, but the ownership experience can feel like a roll of the dice depending on the specific vehicle you get. As the final point on this list, it highlights that for buyers who prioritize rock-solid uniformity and predictable build quality, the Tucson's mixed track record might be a reason to look elsewhere. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the 8 reasons you might want to skip the 2026 Hyundai Tucson. When you put everything together, the modest base power, the transmission quirks, the spotty reliability reports, the electrical hiccups, the fuel economy trade-offs, and that mixed factory build quality, the Tucson starts to look less like a safe long-term bet and more like a gamble in a segment filled with proven champions. Sure, the Tucson has style, comfort, and tech on its side. But if you're the kind of buyer who wants strong performance, bulletproof dependability, and top-tier resale value, the competition simply hits harder. Rivals like the RAV4, CR-V, and CX-5 bring a level of consistency the Tucson hasn't fully nailed yet. So the bottom line? The 2026 Tucson isn't a bad SUV, but it might not be the right SUV for everyone. And that's exactly why you should walk into the showroom knowing both its strengths and its red flags before signing anything. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If this helped you get one step closer to the right car, smash that like button, drop your questions down below, and subscribe to MotorNation for more brutally honest car breakdowns, real-world reviews, and smarter car buying decisions. I'm signing off, but I'll catch you in the next video where we continue helping you drive smarter, not harder.